Way shot many of their classic westerns here in the former territory of the Iños Indians, not far from Death Valley. We are in Lone Pine, California.
Most of the land around here is owned by the city of Los Angeles. They bought the land about 70 years ago because they need our water. Los Angeles would be a desert were it not for our water. So Los Angeles profits by producing electricity and selling it. And they also profit from selling the water that they stole from us back to us. So we're in a sort of a stalemate.
March 31st, 1981. 1 hour past high noon. The Louis D. Statham International Tournament begins as the arbiter starts the clocks. The $50,000 prize fund has attracted 35 masters and 27 international grandmasters. The favorite, Viktor Korchnoi, a Soviet dissident, arrived at Lone Pine during the night in order to surprise the Soviet players. The Soviet Chess Federation has boycotted every tournament Korchnoi has played in since his defection. 2 years ago, Korchnoi had announced his participation in advance. The Soviets had time to withdraw gracefully. But this time, Romanishin and Yusupov are trapped. They must play or lose face. Moscow orders them to play. So for Viktor Korchnoi, the outcast, there will be no boycott here in Lone Pine. But his wife and son are still in the USSR. The authorities have once again rejected their visa application.
There really are two Viktor Korchnois. The one before his defection and the one after.
At the age of 10, Viktor Korchnoi loses almost all his family during the siege of Leningrad. At 13, he decides to devote himself to chess. He is already a fighter and a survivor. Master at 18, international grandmaster at 24, four-time winner of the USSR championship. He is today the official challenger to the world title. At the end of a tournament in Holland in July '76, he asks for and is granted political asylum. The Soviet Union is shocked. Korchnoi becomes a traitor.
There had been many defections in other fields like arts and sports since the end of the Second World War, but in chess, never. Korchnoi was really the first one to leave the USSR, and the reason for that is actually very simple. You had to be crazy to do it. In the West, a chess player is bohemian, he has a life with no security, whereas back there, back in the USSR, you had everything, all the privileges. You had a villa, a car, a trainer. As long as you were on top, you had everything. He didn't understand the political consequences of what he did, because if he had known how hard things would get, he wouldn't have left.
He dedicated all his life only to chess. He left the Soviet Union, he left his wife, his child, and everything in order to have a chess freedom.
When I left the Soviet Union, I did it just for sake of my chess career. I was so squeezed in the Soviet Union, so it was the only chance for me to prolong my chess life. Anyway, authorities, they considered my step, my defection. Well, it's not correct word because I'm not a traitor. Well, Well, I betrayed, how to move the bishop and how to put the better pawn structure. Anyway, they claimed the war to me. They keep now my family as hostages in the Soviet Union.
Here is a player with a reputation for toughness, arrogance, and a fierce will to win. Suddenly one day, legend, history, circumstances pushed him into a role. The legendary role of Don Quixote.
Et cet homme-là s'engage dans ces combats corps et âme, à corps perdu.
And this man throws himself into the struggle with all his heart and soul, with a determination which is fascinating.
Here that in July 1976, after winning the annual IBM tournament, Korchnoi went into a police station, asked for and was given political asylum.
Die bent in een links. Het zegt nee, de naam. Nee, alle kanten. Nee, wacht even.
Today, Karpov and Timan are to play the decisive game in the 20th and last IBM tournament. All the main winners from previous years have been invited, except Korchnoi.
Karpov is a strange human being, scary, but at the same time very fascinating. He comes from the Ural Mountains. I mean, I'm sure he has Asian blood. You see his high cheekbones. I'm sure he's got some Tartar blood.
Anatoly Karpov, son of a worker from the Urals, learns chess at the age of 4, master at 15, international grandmaster at 19 after winning the World Junior Championship.
I first saw him in 1971. He was a promising young grandmaster, and he already promised more than the others. It was during a student Olympiad in Puerto Rico, and somehow the Canadian and the Russian teams ended up on the same beach, I remember, for a swim. And I saw him in his bathing suit. It was incredible. He was like a corpse. I mean, you could practically see his heart in his veins through his skin. And people said, he'll never make it to the World Championship. His health will break down way before. And his head was enormous on top of it, and some people called him a fetus. So anyway, people said, his health will break down. He'll never make it to the World Championship. But he did, and he fooled everybody. His frailty was an illusion, and his thinness was a thinness of steel.
In 1974, he beats Korchnoi in the finals by only 1 point and becomes the official challenger to the world title held by the American Bobby Fischer. Fischer refuses to defend his title, and Karpov is crowned world champion in 1975 by the International Chess Federation. Thanks to another 1-point win against Korchnoi in the 1978 match in the Philippines, he keeps his title and remains a national hero in the Soviet Union.
Of course, he's an enemy during the game. But besides that, he's just, well, quite nice person.
Moi, je suis un Espagnol, anarchiste.
I'm a Spaniard, an anarchist. My father was murdered by Franco. I know all about fascism, about totalitarianism. And for me, Karpov represents everything I hate. The people who killed my father, totalitarianism, state-organized terror. And yet I still feel an incredible tenderness for this player. I find him so frail.
He's a Martian, but a very human, a very vulnerable Martian.
Timan leads the tournament by half a point. Karpov must beat him if he wants to finish in first place. He has just sacrificed a bishop to intensify his attack.
Something extraordinary happened at Linares. When we went to the playing hall, we all went together in a private bus. But there was always one man who went by himself, always surrounded by his bodyguards. It was Karpov, poor man.
Karpov is a very steady player, but very immersed in himself. He never says anything. If you read Karpov's statements, they sound like the Communist Party manifesto. And Karpov always speaks like a textbook. I mean, you can never get a real feeling out of Karpov. All his emotion and passion is concentrated in chess.
They often ask me my opinion about the difference between a strong grandmaster and a world champion. The difference is not great. There's a whole group of first-rate grandmasters who are really very close to the top. Generally speaking, the difference between them and a world champion is that the champion can do certain things. In fact, can do everything a little better than any grandmaster.
Robert Fischer learns chess at the age of 6 and soon loses all interest in anything else. Master and U.S. champion at 14, international grandmaster at 15, the youngest grandmaster in history, wins the U.S. championship 8 times out of 8.
Well, he's a genius. There's really no explanation for genius in any field. He's one and only. How do you explain Mozart? How do you explain Einstein? Because he was so focused on chess from an earliest age. All he ever wanted to do was play chess. He was kicked out of school. He never finished high school. He never did anything except play chess.
Fischer. Well, I haven't known what to think about him for a long time, so I stopped thinking about him. But when I was a kid, I used to read everything, and I didn't like him because he was always making trouble. He was a real prima donna. But as years went by, and his tragedy took place, I mean, a real human tragedy, he became world champion and stopped playing. And I started thinking, because there were still all these rumors and people talked without knowing anything. And I don't know. I came to the conclusion finally that Fischer had been the victim of the lowest form of human jealousy.
At the beginning of the 70s, an unprecedented winning streak propels him to the World Championship match held in Iceland in the summer of '72. He beats Boris Spassky of the USSR brilliantly and puts an end to the long dynasty of Soviet world champions. But he shocks the chess world by not playing a single official game from then on. In 1975, he refuses to defend his title in a $5 million match because of a disagreement with the International Chess Federation over one of the rules. He is stripped of his title and hasn't had anything to do with the chess world since.
The Soviets, when you come down to it, abused Fischer less than the Americans and the people who were closest to him. And that's because no one can really tolerate genius.
Fischer is a very great player, but he is a very strange man. In some respects, he was right. We must have good light, we must have not so much noise, and so on. But you see, he exaggerated a little.
He's going to bed very, very late.
Late?
Yeah. Very, very late. Or early in the morning.
Everything is normal. A lot of people are using that word, normal. That means there must be something else, but there is nothing else. You see, he is so normal as everybody, and he talks absolutely normal.
Il est fou, évidemment qu'il est fou.
Of course he's crazy.
Il gagne les championnats du monde.
For instance, he wins the World Championship.
Un grand financier, une fois de plus américain.
A rich businessman, an American, comes to see him.
Voilà, je vous donne $1 million.
I'll give you $1 million if you make a TV commercial in which you say you use this shampoo. And Fischer answered, but I can't do that because I don't use it.
In fact, I wrote a book about Fischer, the Fischer-Spassky match in 1972, and I wanted to put in the book, now that Fischer's champion, he should be psychoanalyzed. And the publisher made me take it out. He said, you can't talk that way about a world champion.
What's even more amazing is that people keep on saying he was interested in money.
Comme vous voulez, qu'un mystique.
Tell me, how can a mystic who thinks only of God be interested in money? Money for him only meant dignity for the chess player.
Really, he's extraordinary. I don't know if you'll get him. Did you get to Fish at all when you were in Lone Pine?
What does Spassky say?
Spassky said before the '72 match, Fischer plays like a child. And it's true. When you see his personality, when you see him on the screen, he's exactly like a child in the sense that he's naive, he is direct like a child. He has that kind of innocence, but also that inability to adapt himself to so-called reality, to people.
Bobby, I would like to speak with you now. Is it nice to be so famous?
Oh, yeah, it's not bad, not too bad.
Lepo je, nije loše. Da ga upitam kako bi on mogao da definiše samog sebe, šta za njega predstavlja Bobby Fischer? What is Bobby Fischer for you? How could you tell what is Bobby Fischer?
I don't know, it's, you know, it's my name.
Ne znam, to je moje ime. U redu, da ga upitam šta ga najviše interesuje osim šaha. What are you interested except chess?
Oh, you know, I like music and listen to radio, watch television.
Muziku, volim da slušam radio, da posmatram televiziju.
Take a walk, sports, traveling.
Da šetam, da putujem, da se zanimam sportom.
Do my thing, you know.
I da radim svoje stvari. What about your favorite writers? Well, najmiliji pisci?
Favorite writers? Oh, I don't know.
One day you mentioned me in Shakespeare, I think so. Or Arthur Miller also.
I don't know much. I mean, I read a little Shakespeare. Favorite writer?
Malo sam čitao Shakespearea. Najmiliji pisci?
You know, I'm reading mainly magazines.
Yeah.
Il est un révolutionnaire et je pense qu'il est un précurseur.
He's a revolutionary, and I think he is also a forerunner.
Il est le représentant.
But at the same time, he's the representative and the symbol of us, the downtrodden. We all think we're downtrodden, and indeed we are. Even the head of state thinks he's a martyr. But Fischer's martyrdom belongs to the realm of legend, because he was martyred in an unseen, hidden way. He was insulted and betrayed by his times, the same way as a man like, say, Van Gogh.
Como l'a été, par exemple, un homme comme Van Gogh.
The field where chess heroes have their showdown is the chessboard. It is a black and white but highly colored world, yin and yang, positive, negative, good, evil. This piece is called the pawn, that is a foot soldier. In French, it's called a pion, and in German, a peasant. It's the archetypal symbol of the poor and weak, which is why there are so many of them on the board. The pawn steps forward 1 or 2 squares at a time and can never, never retreat. The knight has a unique privilege. It can jump over any and all obstacles. The French call it cavalier, a rider. The Germans, more precise, have named it springer, a jumper. The bishop, which always moves diagonally, is for the French a jester, for the Germans a runner, for the Spaniards an elephant. More powerful than the knight or the bishop, the rook or castle was in the beginning an armored elephant ready for battle and forerunner of the modern tank. It can march in straight lines in every direction. After the revolution, the French started calling her the lady, but in English, the queen is still the queen.
Move, I tell you.
Originally, in India, Persia, and Arabia, she was male and weak.
Check, Your Grace.
But she changed sex in Europe in the Middle Ages and became the strongest of all chess pieces.
I fear the queen is powerless now. The queen is never powerless. For example.
His Majesty the King, a lazy monarch really, who moves only 1 square at a time. When the king is dead, that is checkmate, the game is over. But the king can die in many ways. Mathematically speaking, there are as many possible chess games as atoms in the visible universe.
I find out there's so many chess, so many different games, 43 different games. So I take the rules from this one, I make them for that one, and I combine them with the Byzantium chess. I think it is beautiful. I mean, they feel nice to play with. That was the idea, you know, to have something that feels nice. Feels warm. In the winter, you can play them very well. Made in the Dutch colors, you know. Red, white, and blue. And orange is also...
That's the French flag.
Ah, no, the French, they have it like this, you know.
Fascinated by this infinite chessboard, man has always wanted to solve its riddle. The great automaton of the 18th century gave the illusion that he had succeeded, but it was only an illusion. There was always a brilliant midget hidden in the machine. Today's brilliant midget is the microprocessor. He beats the best backgammon players, is already the world champion at checkers, and wants to beat man at chess.
King's pawn to king 4.
Do you realize what it's like to lose to a machine? This is like your life. This is something you grew up with. It's so important to you, and it's competitive. To lose to a machine, you can't psych it. You can't talk to it. You can't give it a funny look. It's very hard to lose in the first place, but to lose to a machine.
The best chess program in the world is called Bell. It is being developed by Ken Thompson and Joe Condon of the Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill, New Jersey.
And it doesn't get disturbed when it's losing. It doesn't get upset and play badly. It plays the same strength all the time. But there is one little area.
There is one little area.
It has an opening book where the moves are put in advance. And when it gets to the end of this opening book and it has to think for itself, it's like it wakes up about move 10. It sees the position for the first time. Up to that point, it was playing all moves out of its memory. For the first time, it wakes up and it looks around and says, "Oh my God, I'm going down."
In the past, computers did things in a very sequential nature. It would do this and then do this and then do this and then do this. The computers of today and those of tomorrow will do many things in parallel, just as the human mind seems to do many things in parallel.
Right now, it's looking at about 120 to 130,000 positions a second. That's a lot of positions.
Chess is a form of intelligence, and I believe it is based on visual memory. The famous child prodigy Samuel Reshevsky, who was giving simultaneouses by the age of 6 or 7, was examined by a psychologist in 1921, and in many tests his results were inferior to children of his own age. But in all the tests involving visual memory, he was not only better than all the children of his own age, but he was superior to all the grown-ups.
Did you see Star Wars? They talked about the Force in Star Wars. Well, there's something like that when you're playing chess. You feel it, you sense it, you know when you have the Force with you. You know when it's working with you, and you know when you don't have it, too.
Yeah.
And when you don't have it, you try to avoid certain kinds of tactical positions. You try to play very simple, very straightforward positions, because you know that if you're put to the test, you won't be able to handle it.
What you're trying to say is when we built the computer, we left out all that bullshit type of stuff.
In the beginning, in India, about 13 centuries ago, chess was played by 4 opponents with dice. It was called chaturanga. Chaturanga conquers all of Europe and at the beginning of its 2nd millennium arrives one day in America.
People tend to think that chaturanga, chess, is a game of rich, sedentary people, a game for the elite. But that's not true at all. It's a game actually of nomads, of ethnic minorities. The fact that Jews have dominated it for 100 years proves it. Take New York, the largest Jewish city in the world and a great immigration center. They play chess everywhere, on the sidewalks, in the parks.
Oh, God, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? In the beginning, they were actual battles, and if you lost, you had a finger cut off or you were killed.
Why do you want to do this to me?
The American chess players, you know, if you look at it in historical perspective, apart from Morphy, there's a very narrow range because they almost all come from the New York Jewish community, the Manhattan Chess Club and the Marshall Chess Club.
And when they say that Bobby Fischer grew up in a chess desert, it's just not true.
The Jews have traditionally been allowed to play chess on Saturday. It's the only game allowed, and you can't do anything else. If you're a very Orthodox Jew, you can't do anything else on Saturday. So they sat around playing chess.
No, but E3, I've never seen this.
Fischer is half Jewish, Spassky is half Jewish, but Winnik, Tal were all Jews.
Most of the great violinists of this century have been Russian Jews. Most of the great chess players have been Russian Jews. My own parents came from Russia.
First world champion was an incredible Jew born in Prague. His name was Steinitz. He played chess with God using the sidewalks of New York City. But he loved God so much that to give him an edge, he spotted him a pawn.
The chess player who's deeply immersed in the game eventually encounters, how can I say, a kind of religious mystery. There aren't many activities, especially in our society, that make people think for so long, so intensely. So there are times when they experience certain phenomena, some kind of hallucinations, I don't know. But I'm sure they all know these moments when thought becomes almost pure and merges into something other than chess. It's almost as though the motion, the constellation of the pieces, the fundamental laws of the game correspond with the greater fundamental laws of the universe. They're like materializations in a smaller world of what's happening everywhere else, including in their mind.
Karpov's big problem in Baguio came when Korchnoi started receiving help from the Ananda Marga.
Ananda Marga, an Indian religious sect accused of terrorism.
He, the communist, was helped by the devil, but his rival was helped by God.
Vladimir Zhukov, a Soviet psychologist and hypnotist whose stare was supposed to upset Korchnoi.
It's hard to believe that a man can have a spiritual influence on the game. But Karpov believes that, and his team believes that.
Alors, c'est pas fascinante.
Don't you find it fascinating, then, that they built this pharaonic monument called Marxist-Leninism, and all of a sudden, underneath, there is a little mouse nibbling away at it? So these communists who, quote-unquote, don't believe in God, moved heaven and earth to get the religious sect out of the hall. Because when the religious sect was there, Korchnoi, who was losing 5-2, managed to equalize the score 5-5. Incredible.
Incroyable.
You see, I'm trying to be careful, not to be blamed, in insanity. Yeah, well, you may make your conclusions, not me. Just give you raw material.
I never thought I'd see the day when chess would be all over the front pages, here, but confined only to one paragraph in Pravda. I guess that's my fault. It just depends who's winning. Thank you.
One of the restaurants here, last year at the tournament, hung up a sign in the window, no chess players.
There's a striking and almost eerie analogy between Bobby Fischer and Paul Morphy. Both were Americans, both were the best players, by far the best players of their day, and both quit chess when they reached the top. And they had kind of meteoric careers. Morphy played from 1858 to 1860, and he was a real national hero in his day. They practically mobbed him when he came back to New York from a triumphal European trip.
But the French couldn't say Murphy, they said Morphy.
When he came back from that famous trip, they gave an enormous banquet in his honor in New York City, just like for Fischer. And the German got up and started saying what a great profession chess was, and immediately Morphy got up and shouted he was not a professional chess player, and he just walked out, slammed the door and just walked out. He never played chess again. He issued a challenge to the world. He said he would give anybody the white pieces and a pawn, and nobody dared to accept it, so he just went back to New Orleans and eventually became a little bit crazy. His great ambition was to become a lawyer, but he couldn't, because nobody would treat him except as a chess player. Even his sweetheart wouldn't marry him because she said she couldn't marry a chess player.
Bobby, have you ever lost your cool?
In what way?
During a game?
No, never have.
Have you come close to it?
No, that's a part of the game, keeping your cool.
Do you ever try to upset your opponent during a game?
Good moves, good moves. I don't go into tricks. No, I don't believe in pacing around in circles and, staring at my opponent's eyes, this kind of stuff.
What about pre-game publicity?
What about it?
Do you use psychology to make your opponent?
No, I just say the truth.
What would you tell him now?
Spassky? What would I tell him? No, I would like to tell him anything. I'd just like to sit down and talk with him,
I'm Spassky. I come and say to you, I can beat you. I'm not afraid of you.
Well, I would say that those words have been put in your mouth and you don't believe it. Okay.
It's a miracle that the 1972 World Championship match in Reykjavik was held at all. After 7 months of negotiations, Spassky and Fischer can't agree. Max 𝐕, president of the International Chess Federation, imposes Reykjavik, which is offering a $125,000 prize fund, as the site. When Spassky won the title in Moscow in 1969, he received $1,400. However, a few days before the scheduled start, Fischer announces that he is still not satisfied with the financial conditions and threatens not to play. A British millionaire doubles the prize fund at the last moment. The match begins. For the organizers, it is the beginning of a 3-month-long agony. Fischer wrangles about everything, the size and color of the pieces, the lighting, even the noise from the audience. I, Bobby Fischer, request all front seats to be moved back 10 rows due to the noise from their being too close. He loses the first game. Claiming the television cameras are disturbing his concentration, he refuses to show up for the second game and loses it by default. The score is 2-0, and Fischer has still never beaten Spassky. In order to save the match, the cameras are removed.
Damaging party that has been determined by a court of law.
How much money?
Koliko para ćete izgubiti?
An awful lot of money.
Vrlo mnogo.
An awful lot of money.
Fischer starts winning and soon takes a 3-point lead. But nothing will calm him down. His threats, his temper tantrums and protests make front-page news all over the world.
Ovdje njegova žalba.
The Soviets are exasperated and decide to counterattack. They demand that the chairs of the players be scientifically checked, claiming that the American team may have rigged them electronically. The Icelandic police discover something. 2 dead flies in Spassky's chair. A week later, Fischer wins the match 12.5 to 8.5 and becomes the 11th official world champion since Steinitz.
Okay, A6.
You go here, I play this.
Okay,
Oh, wait a minute. You have to play
shall we play
A4.
A4?
Maybe A6 even. A6.
Oh, he took on B5.
Ja?
It's not easy.
Wat is het
Nou, is het dus toch gekomen, G5. Waarom, even kijken, wat is de pointe van toren E1? Nou ja. Nou, hij kan inderdaad, wit dreigt nu, toren B naar E3 en toren E8. Nee, toren A8 niet. En nu zit Karpov al een hele tijd te denken, hè?
È très difficile d'être l'épouse, la maîtresse.
It is extremely hard to be the wife, the mistress, the girlfriend, or the boyfriend of a chess player, because it is a game which devours life. The tournament game lasts 5 hours, but preparing for it takes all morning. Then there's the analysis, which can take all night if the game is adjourned. I mean, who can afford such a luxury?
Qui peut se permettre ce luxe?
That's right. There's something in male psychology which lends itself to the chess. It's just like combats in general. Women do go in for sports, but not to the same extent as men. There are physical reasons, there are psychological reasons.
Physiologically inferior for chess? What's physiologically inferior about me?
The hemisphere that controls mathematic and spatial relationship abilities is developed more highly in the male than the female due to hormones. That's simply a fact. You can't argue with that.
Well, the woman wants a man. She wants some love. She wants the man to admire her and to love her and to take care of her. And she's not going to do it by becoming a great chess player.
It is bohemian life, you know. I am from Czechoslovakia. It was called Bohemia, no, sometimes. Bohemian, so, well, I don't mind. I lost my life in chess, actually, but I think it's nice. Look at this, for example. I played this game with Polugajevsky, and I made such a nice move that all Amsterdam was talking about this move, of course. And no, it is some intuition. You go for it, and it is there, you know. You think sometimes you look at the position and you think there must be something, you know. And the people like to find it.
I am particularly concerned with brilliancies in chess. I love to see a brilliancy. Many people in tournaments will come over and tell me there's a brilliancy or somebody sacrificed the queen, and I'll run to look at that particular game.
What is the sacrifice in chess? It's when this knight dies, it dies for the sake of all the collectivity. It's the magic, the miracle of the game. And it is so because it transcends routine and ordinary, everyday logic. The aim of the game is to win as many pieces as you can so you can eventually mate the other guy. But the sacrifice does exactly the opposite. And your feeling is to say, it's crazy. You're giving away a knight.
Well, actually, I found everything clearer after the game was finished. It means here, you know, on this board, in that room, yes. But most I saw during the game, and I just misplayed it, and it's pity because the game would be very famous and it would stay until next century or something like this. But I'm sorry for it. I will be sad still sometime. The computer should win this game already. But I don't think that computer would get this idea.
Move your knight to D7, Anatoly.
No, nothing else. When Karpov and Timan are analyzing the game after drawing, everything looks really civilized. Both are seeking the truth. Both want to know what was the best move in such and such a position. That's on the face of it. But what they're also doing, and something even more important in a way, is trying to find out what went on in the other guy's head during the game. That's what they're seeking. They're spying on each other so that they can know more about the opponent's mental process for future reference. So you can see, even when the game is, the rivalry is never over. Korchnoi is not just one of the chess players. He's, as they would say in Reader's Digest, he's really one of the most memorable people I've ever met. I first saw him in Buenos Aires.
I expect you back here next year as world champion.
Thank you. I didn't speak to him then, but I could feel a tremendous force in his mere presence. Even when he just would say something simple like, "Please pass the salt," his words would hit you just like a punch.
This is the 11th tournament, and I still don't know how to play chess.
It's been a lot of fun for me. And we've certainly had some great chess players here, 27 grandmasters playing, 2 more on the sidelines.
The winner, the only Viktor Korchnoi.
Fischer's great revolution was to play as enterprisingly with the black pieces as with the white pieces.
To the sponsor of the tournament, Mr. Tatum, and his wife, well, thank you very much.
Before him, since the advent of modern chess, when you had black and you had to defend against white's first move, the tactic was to play it safe and play for the draw, and wait for the next day when your turn with white would come. Then you would attack. But Fischer attacked or counterattacked all the time.
Which game you chose? Koju partiju Bobby izabrao?
Larsen against Donner from San Juan.
To je partija između Larsena I Donnera na turniru San Juanu, na kome je Larsen slabo igra.
Larsen says, you know, that he says it's possible to do many things in chess. You don't have to play just the ordinary way, you know.
Bobby Fischer plays Bobby Fischer's style. I can say like Mozart, like Beethoven. He played his system.
And now I think Donner doesn't get the correct plan.
Mislim da sada Donner kao crni nije izabrao korektan plan.
Plays knight h5.
On igrao skakač h5.
In order to play f5, but
želeći da igra f5 posle.
But this is only good if the center is closed, like so.
To je jedino dobro.
Fischer in those times, he played scientific chess, in my opinion, because he was believing in action, which means that only the movement of chess pieces, the real action of chess pieces are giving a result. But Karpov believes, which is true also, that sometimes tactics wins over dynamics. And I believe that dynamical chess wins after all. It is the way to the truth, in my opinion.
Now Larsen plays a very fine move.
Sada Larsen igra veoma lijep potez, konj, but unusual also.
Unusual is
I također neobičan potez.
This knight is coming here and here. Very central square controls this.
Taj skakač dolazi kasnije preko.
People think that you know hundreds of games by heart. That's not true. I know. To nije istina. Maybe I hardly know any by heart.
Fischer was brave as a chess player, you see. He was giving chances to his opponent, but actually there were no chances because he was always being at least one move ahead, you see.
That last game against Spassky in the match was one of the greatest games they ever played because he had a positional combination 10 moves long. Nobody makes such positional combination. He foresaw the whole thing. But of course he didn't persist.
It's well known that Fischer is the strongest player in the whole chess history. Whether he will play or not, it's not clear. It seems that the more he abstains from chess, well, the more difficult for him to come back.
Karpov is not trying not to give chances to the players. to his opponents. He tries to cut the game, to cut all possibilities for his player, and then he can start to develop his play. But that kind of chess cannot win, in my opinion.
I think that Fischer is a much more superior player. But Karpov has proved more than Fischer did.
Mr. Karpov, you made this tournament into a historic one, because this is the first time that you didn't win a Dutch tournament. Nevertheless, I think the world of chess can be proud of a world champion who plays in so many tournaments and wins so many of them. Thank you.
Karpov thinks that he's a prophet of communism. He has his gift for chess, and he believes that it entrusts him with a mission. When he goes to the West, he's very aware that he's a spokesman both for his system and for his country.
As a real Dutchman, Mr. Timman came today by bike, and I congratulate you with a fantastic first place. And the people of the Dutch IBM company are very happy that you crowned our tournament with a Dutch victory.
So you think it's very important for a big city to have a yearly tournament like this?
Especially for Amsterdam, because we know Amsterdam is one of the most important chess centers in the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karpov, and lots of luck in September when you play for the World Championship.
And when he came 3 years ago to North America, he went to Washington, he went to New York City, he even went to Disneyland. He got himself photographed with all sorts of stars and public figures. His aim was to show that he was a good guy. It was a blitz to charm the medias, and that's because he's one of the few Soviets who understands the power of the medias in North America.
My private life does not interfere with chess and vice versa.
Before this interview, given in Murano for this film, Karpov demanded the list of questions in advance.
I have a son.
He rejected 3 of them, learned the other 22 by heart, and answered them without an interviewer.
I can say that...
The name of Korchnoi did not come up once during his 45-minute speech.
2 or 3 years old.
Just you wanted to add something about computers, you said, no?
No, no.
No, okay.
No, I finished.
Okay.
The short
You just want to add
sentences,
something now, right?
yes. But this is the last question. Когда играешь в шахматы,
When I play chess,
то самое главное...
when I'm taking part in a tournament, the only thing that really matters to me is the game.
В турнире только игру в шахматы...
If a chess player had to also keep his mind on other matters, such as his country, his team, or his reputation, then things would be very complicated.
Ему действительно сложнее играть, если он вспоминает все...
It's really tough to play chess with other things going on in your mind.
Шахмат.
The opening ceremonies of the World Championship. Karpov and Korchnoi are going to draw to decide who will start with the advantage of the white pieces in the first game. Korchnoi wins the draw. He will have white.
That's all.
The next day, outside the Murano Civic Center, a group of friends distribute leaflets calling for the release of the Korchnoi family. Inside, play has just started. Korchnoi has played pawn to queen's bishop 4, an English opening which Karpov soon steers into a queen's gambit.
Sì, vabbè, ma tanto loro devono pagare l'inizio.
Sie können auch mit Telefon hinrufen und Details.
Donna mangia cavallo, scarpe, allora...
Avrebbe mangiato il cavallo in E6 e poi preso un C8 con la donna. Hai visto?
It's going to be a very exciting match. I think this is the first time in chess history that we have about more than 100 photo reporters and cameramans and everybody. I was in Reykjavik and Bagi. I was in 20 last years. Every chess tournament and big chess tournament and matches, but I never saw like this. This is fantastic. This is big propaganda for chess.
The World Championship is taking place in Paradise, an operetta paradise set in Italy's southern Tyrol. Not far away, in Marostica, tradition dictates that a live chess game should be played every 2 years.
Chess is really a fascinating game. Without anyone being really aware of it, the game of chess mirrors history perfectly. When the Spaniards, for instance, were conquering America, the world's best player lived naturally in Madrid. Here's an easy riddle. Who was this player? Of course, he was a priest. And what was the fashionable opening? Of course, it was the Spanish game. And what was the salient feature of this game? Of course, it was the attack. What happened during the Renaissance? Naturally, the style and the champion were Italian. And who will be the champion at the time of the French Revolution, at the time when the world discovers that the ordinary man, the peasant, the worker is equal to the king? Of course, it could only have been a Frenchman, Philidor. A Frenchman who's going to say something earth-shattering. Before the revolution, by the way. He himself was not a revolutionary. He was a musician who created the comic opera. This man, then, who did not know he was a revolutionary, said something that was astonishing for the time, a real blow to history. He said the king, the queen, the bishop, they're not important. What's important in chess are the pawns. Pawns are the soul of chess. You could already hear the revolution, see the guillotine cutting the heads of kings.
I think this match Karpov will win 6-3, because Karpov is not only 20 years younger, but he's the best player of today, because Fischer is not playing.
Up to the 19th century, the only thing that mattered was attack, attack, attack at all cost. There were swashbuckling games. Defensive moves were considered cowardly. They were like the bourgeois moves, whereas the attacker was the great warrior, the knight in shining armors, and so on.
Korchnoi is the big fighter like Lasker, and he always wants to be like in the red, just to be in balance between death and life. Very, very brave player, and it's very difficult to play like this.
Korchnoi is older, so he has to do his work now.
Up to Morphy, up to 1870, the style, the era was those of Romanticism. But at the end of that century, because of Steinitz and his disciples, the game took on a whole new appearance. Things went to the other extreme. It was the era of science, of faith and progress, and some eventual perfection for mankind. And theory changed and became dogmatic. People thought that the few principles discovered at the time were enough to solve the whole game. At the beginning of the 20th century, chess was played very much the way war was waged during the First World War, trenches. It was then, at the time when even the strongest players were talking of the death, of the exhaustion of the game, that the hypermodern revolution took place. The hypermoderns rejected the beliefs of the previous era, the classical era, so-called. They went much further. They said, sure, the center squares are very important, but you mustn't occupy them too soon, because then you're just asking to be attacked. So they started playing openings based on the fianchettos, that is, the development of the bishops away from the center, but aimed at the center, sort of like cannons. It was the concept of bombing in chess. Occupation, yes, but before that, bombardment. In 1927, Capablanca faced Alekhine, who had assimilated all the new ideas, and to everyone's surprise, Alekhine beat him. Capablanca was the so-called chess machine whose invincibility had made him say that chess was more or less figured out. Karpov is like, the style is very similar with Capablanca and Fischer and machine, like chess machine. And once I asked Fischer, are you chess machine? He said,
they always call whoever has success as a machine, you know, until he loses.
I spoke with Karpov about his style and I asked him, why you play so simple? He said the most beautiful way is the simplest way to win the game.
Before he became world champion, he didn't win a single game against me. But when he became world champion, I got a complex against world champion. I was losing all the games. It's incredible. Because of some psychological respect, probably. Psychological respect, not chess respect.
You've got more talent than Karpov, in my opinion. But not so many people are working for you.
It is completely normal that I'm feeling inferior a little bit comparing to Karpov in a way that I have to face some very strong machinery.
He came to Merano with an incredibly powerful team with incredible ammunitions. They say that he brought a library of 7,000 books. And when he has 10 or 20 grandmasters working for him, he's really the boss. He tells them what to do. He says, bring me so many pages of analysis on such and such opening I'm intending to play. And he checks their work very thoroughly and criticizes them. He's responsible for everything and wants to be ready for every situation in the match.
At St. Petersburg in 1914, Tsar Nicholas II confers for the first time the title of Grand Master on tournament winner Emanuel Lasker, Steinitz' successor, on Capablanca, on Alekhine, and on Marshall. Marshall at the 1925 Moscow tournament. This time the event is held under the auspices of the Communist Party. Lenin, himself an avid chess player, has followed in the footsteps of the Tsar. These scenes come from Podovkin's satirical comedy Chess Fever.
The chess players of the time sold to the Communist Party the idea of sponsoring chess by pointing out the mental and the moral qualities it develops, and also because it wasn't an expensive game. Up to then, chess was a symbol of wealth. I mean, these symbols are symbols of rich people. And also there was the fact that in the Soviet Union in 1920, most of the people were illiterate. And so the authorities thought that if they would provide people the incentive of playing chess, and so the need to write down the moves and read theory, they would give them desire to learn how to read. So chess was included in the mass campaigns for literacy, both for propaganda and political reasons. Almost all the great Soviet players were kids during the Second World War, and they suffered tremendously during their childhood. Korchnoi, for instance, was practically the only surviving member of his family. He went through the siege of Leningrad, I think, when he was 11 or 12, and that left some very deep scars in his personality, both on the chessboard and outside.
Alekhine became a Nazi, and although he denied it and all that, as was typical of collaborators, no, it's all somebody else. He wrote a series of articles, and he stayed in Nazi Germany, and he was a very great chess player, but he was not a pleasant person.
All the other Soviet champions were men who found in chess something to cling on to at the end of their traumatic war experiences. Petrosian, during the war, had to scrounge for food in garbage bags just to survive. So this generation of Soviet players, to which Korchnoi belongs to, along with many others like Spassky and Bronstein, became strong chess players not only because they lived in the Soviet Union, but because they were natural fighters and survivors and were used living with this discipline and this ferocious will to win. Now, Karpov is not the same. He belongs to a later generation, a happier and more spoiled one. And there's just another reason why Korchnoi despises him. To him, he's just a greenhorn.
Last year, Karpov has played in 5 or 6 very strong tournaments. Oh, of course, he lost 7 games. He 3 times failed to be the best or even to show a satisfactory result. I mean, but regarding his practice overall, he's in much better condition.
The psychological approach to the chess. from the Soviet chess players is completely different than from the other chess players. They like to win. They like to win no matter on which way, you see? And they are trained to win no matter which way.
People like to win. Yes. Americans especially, yes.
Today's players have all learned from the Soviets, and the Soviets say that the best exponent of the Soviet school is Bobby Fischer himself.
All his life, actually, he was very lonely. He was fighting against very strong Russian chess school.
And the U.S. Federation was a laughingstock. A single individual wouldn't have a chance under these circumstances. And in all this, in all my years of chess, the U.S. Chess Federation was a ridiculous non-entity. I never supported the chess masters in any way. I never got a penny. I always went on my own all over the world. And you need a political backup. See, the Russians not only have the political backup, they won't let the player give up chess.
And nobody tells, well, chess has nothing to do with politics. Of course it has to do with politics.
It's a miracle that Fischer managed to beat Spassky at Reykjavik.
Just think of it. This man was world champion, recognized by all as the best player on earth, light years ahead of the next guy. And at the peak of his career, the Soviet Federation succeeded in taking away his title, thanks to some red tape, in order to give it to one of its pawns. And no one dared to raise their voice, to defend this poet who was being crushed, this forerunner who was all alone. The American Federation itself failed to defend him. Nobody defended him. They stripped him of his title by sheer force. And what was the excuse? That's the most unbelievable part. I'm sure the devil exists. I mean, at least he exists for me. But the devil is a very funny fellow. The devil pulled the strings in such a way that they took away his title because he wanted the World Championship to be played in an unlimited number of games. Until then, with a set number of games, you could become champion by drawing your games. But Fischer said, to become champion, you must win.
But also, I've said for many years that it should be the first player to win a certain number of games without draws counting. Like the first player to win 10 games wins the match without any draws. This is a much bigger, harder test because if one side gets ahead, then he has to keep winning game after game. This way, if the guy gets ahead, all he has to do is draw game after game to win the match.
Do you think now, with your growing fame, with all your prestige, you will be able to change the present system?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have to get the title because the system's all, the Russians have had the title. They've been dominating the rules, tailoring them to their own advantage, playing once every 3 years, and, playing only against their own men and this kind of thing, blocking all foreigners.
They just pushed him aside. And then Karpov got his paper title. It was shameful. I wouldn't accept a Nobel Prize like that for anything.
I prepared myself particularly thoroughly for the 1975 match. But he and I did not meet because the American Grandmaster refused to defend his title. I must say that from 1972 on, once he became world champion, he didn't play in a single serious event. I think he was unable to cope with his own invincibility. He got more or less scared to sit down again in front of the board and risk losing. But only he who never plays never.
The psychology of a small country is always to defend itself. And the psychology of big countries, they are trying to dominate everybody else, you see? So, in the chess world, there is the same symbolic point of view. The Russians are trying to show that they are the best.
So we come back to this disaster which started off with the Renaissance and is still going on today. and which I hope will come to an end. The cataclysm of the centralized state, the almighty state, against which Fischer has always fought, and Korchnoi too.
Fischer et Korchnoi aussi. Il est évident que les championnats aujourd'hui, les championnats du monde,
obviously, today's World Championship just had to pit a member of the Communist Party, a member of the Soviet nomenclatura, Karpov, against a dissident, Korchnoi. But making the picture even more perfect, above them there's that mystic, retired to Pasadena, California, gazing down at them, recognized by all as the greatest, Fischer.
52 persons of all my family were killed in Auschwitz during the war. I know that some Russian journalists who are sitting right now here, they lost their parents because on the Stalin purchase. I would like the Russian delegation to know this letter of support to Viktor Korchnoi from the leading Russian intellectuals who are living abroad, because I feel that the Russian journalists, maybe they will not know this letter for a while. Дорогой Виктор Корчной,
Dear Viktor Korchnoi, on the eve of the difficult match in Merano, we would like you to know that we, your fellow countrymen, by birth, by freedom, and by struggle, support you with all our strength and hopes.
Mrs. Korchnoi is a simple housewife, you see. She has nothing to do with the politics of Soviet Union, nothing. She's a simple housewife. And what is her son? He was 19 when he was sentenced to 2.5 years of prison. Now he is 21.
Je vous signale que pour la première fois,
I would just like to point out that it is the first time in the history of artistic and cultural relations between nations.
Qu'un rival, ou le partenaire d'un rival,
it's the first time that one side has kept hostage the wife and son of an opponent. The first time.
You can see here all these documents. We never received an answer. We never received from a political authority in the Soviet Union an answer. The Russian Constitution itself is writing the family is under the protection of the state. Perhaps they make an exception in the case of Viktor Korchnoi. And we are supported by the United Nations Charter. Every person has the right to leave any country he chooses, including his own.
And so the Soviets do so as they would have let them out if he would have been better. But in all the other cases, no. These are hostages. They are afraid other people are jumping away too. And so they show, you can go, please, but your family will not keep.
Je pense qu'il faut chercher les raisons.
I think one must look for the most down-to-earth reasons. I think that they really believe that by doing this, they will ruin Korchnoi's concentration. So they came up with this ridiculous stratagem. But I want to add something. I'm sure that Karpov is against it.
Viktor
Korchnoi is now 50 years old. Maybe the Russians think that he won't be a threat anymore in 3 years. He won't be able to win the finals. He won't be Mr. Karpov's opponent in 3 years. We believe that the Soviet Union has not let his wife and son go because a worried Korchnoi is not as dangerous as a calm Korchnoi.
N'est pas tellement dangereux comme un Korchnoi tranquille, voyez.
Parce que ce match.
Take this match, which is being played now.
C'est ridicule, l'enjeu.
It's ridiculous what's at stake. I mean, what the hell does it matter who wins? May the best man win, that's all.
Que le meilleur gagne. Il faut être vraiment un marxiste-léniniste.
You really have to be a totalitarian Marxist-Leninist to imagine that the future of some theory or some ideology is at stake.
Le texte de l'agence TASS.
TASS agency article quotes, among other things, a letter of Korchnoi to his wife. He's supposed to mention in it a $3,000 a year pension he promised her some time ago.
De $3,000 par an.
I would like to know how they can know the correspondence between a couple, between wife and husband Korchnoi. We do not want to know what happens between wife Karpov and husband Karpov.
We are coming very closely to another brain in chess. You know, you are fighting brain on brain. But we are trained for it, you know. The chess player's brain is trained for these matters.
The Soviet Union in population is approximately the same, a little bit bigger than the United States of America. But they have at the moment 5 million active member of the Chess Federation. And when a Russian person, an average Russian, has not the chance to go to McDonald's to take a Big Mac and French fried potatoes and large Coke, then he has to have something which will show to him that he is still VIP of the world. And this is, they know that unfortunately Argentina is playing better soccer. No way. But chess, we are playing the best. Unfortunately, in the tragic history of Russia, once they were very lucky. They had a real Russian champion of the world, Alexander Alyokhin. But Alexander Alyokhin escaped from Soviet Union and they lost the Russian champion. And after Alyokhin, only Jews were on the chess throne of the world. Right now, who are Jews? They're spies, they're Zionists, they're not real Soviet people. And finally, God bless the Soviet authorities. They found a real Russian superstar. This is their creation. They put all effort to show that we don't need the son of a bitches Jews. We are clever than they are. We have our own champion, 100% Russian. And if this Russian God will lose here in Merano, this will be a tragedy of the Soviet people. This means of the, I'm saying not of the Russian people, but of the Soviet. I insist in the difference between these two meanings.
This is the beginning of a stage play at which we are all spectators. And it is a play which the Kremlin bosses have totally misunderstood. They think that what's at stake here is victory, but that's not it. What's at stake here is their showing their true face. And it's a play which they are, so to speak, in the process of losing. Batyrinsky, as you know, is a man who dispensed justice at the time of Stalin. So there have been hundreds and thousands of victims who have died because of Batyrinsky. He is an expert on gulags, like the one where Korchnoi's son is at this moment. And so you have Karpov, such a frail, such a delicate-looking man, who finds himself forced to look for a grandfather figure. And who is this grandfather? This monster who, on top of it, has all the appearance of a sweet old grandpa.
But because Robert Fischer refused to play, in 1975, in April, Anatoly Karpov was proclaimed world champion.
Mr. Karpov, your opponent was asked recently what he thought of you, and he was rather frank, saying that he hated you and the system you represented. What are your feelings for Mr. Korchnoi? And do you have any empathy for the personal problems he's having in your country?
Karpov hates Korchnoi with all his guts, all his soul. But Karpov is stuck because even if he didn't hate Korchnoi, he would have no choice.
Mr. Korchnoi is emeritus opponent, emeritus rival, and with his having won the candidates matches, that's why I am going to play him.
They don't shake hands anymore ever since Korchnoi openly attacked the communist government. It was during the Baguio match. But Karpov waited for the right moment. They shook hands before each of the first 6 games. And at the 7th, he just came down calmly and sat down, and didn't do anything. Now, Korchnoi is a man for whom conventions are still very important. They have, symbolic value, and that a man 20 years younger than him shows no respect was a big insult. And so, when that happened, he just fell apart and lost the game, the 7th game, like nothing. So Karpov had decided not to shake hands, but he didn't call up or write to Korchnoi. He just did it at the right moment, and it won him a crucial point. In fact, it won him the whole championship because the match was decided by 1 point.
The Soviets are very mad to see me here. The former director of the Moscow chess club, Batyrinsky, he doesn't see me at all. It's as if I were made of glass. Nothing. Krogius doesn't see me either. The other day I went up to Batyrinsky and asked him if he was going to say hello to me. He said, what? Say hello to you? Are you crazy? It was a ride.
Ivanov un jour joue contre Karpov.
Ivanov one day is paired against Karpov. It's the chance of his life. He's going to prove to Batyrinsky that he is a good player, worthy of playing abroad. And he wants to play abroad, not just for the fun of it, of course, but in order to escape, to get the passport. So he sits down against Karpov. By the 36th move, he dominates the game. He plays a Sicilian, he attacks, he plays with no fear, because his life is at stake. No, his freedom, it's more important than his life. At the 36th move, he sees that, despite his attack, Karpov has a move which can force the draw. And Ivanov is shaking because it means goodbye to trips, goodbye to passports. He can't take his eyes off that move. And right then, Karpov misses his chance.
Well, he always wants to win, and that's why he lost.
All the Russians know there is an international area at the airport in Canada. But even when he gets the passport, Ivanov must be careful not to look at his ticket too soon, or else Batyrinsky might suspect something. That's why Ivanov played chess. All right, I'll make an effort. I'll speak in English.
The chess magazine 64, of which, Master Karpov, you are the editor, has published on cover several times the picture of Leonid Brezhnev. Is it an homage to an unknown chess player or an intolerable way of mixing politics with the chess? First question. Second question. Boris Gulko a declared a match Karpov-Korchnoi in the actual situation is an insult for Karpov himself. The sound of the bars of Igor Korchnoi prison will cover the chess war. What is your opinion, Master Karpov?
Ну, первое, что я должен сказать, на каком языке я мастер, потому что на всех языках я вроде бы гроссмейстер.
In which language am I supposed to be a master? Because in all the languages I know I am a grandmaster. I am a world champion, yes?
Да.
I am a world champion and grandmaster, not master.
In allen Sprachen, in denen ich bis jetzt
Вот, второе.
Second.
Zum Zweiten.
Мы очень благодарны.
We are very grateful.
He's sharp, he's witty, and he's very likable, actually. And he's also quite ironic. It's well known that Karpov is one of the grandmasters who knows the most anti-communist jokes. But you won't find any on tape.
Когда я покинул Батуринский, все достаточно логично, видимо, объяснил.
As to the second part of your question, the head of the Soviet delegation will answer your question right after I leave the auditorium. Because as we have agreed before. Chess questions only.
In 1980, after having legislated the size of the rocks to be used for the stoning of adulteresses, the Ayatollah Khomeini forbids the practice of the diabolical game of chess, repeating perhaps unwittingly a move made by several popes during the Middle Ages. At the same time, the Catholic Church is hardening its stand on the issue of abortion and has chosen as its leader Jean-Paul II, the first pope ever to have composed and published chess problems.
Vem är du? Jag är döden. Du spelar ju schack, inte sant? Varför vill du spela schack med mig? Villkoret är att jag får leva så länge jag står dig emot.